In June of 2021, a heated argument broke out between 37-year-old Shane Raymond and his ex-girlfriend, 31-year-old Jenny Downs, at an apartment complex in North Hollywood, California, after learning that Raymond was supposedly trying to kidnap Downs' family friend. Roberto Fletes Corneo tried to intervene but was shot. Raymond forced Downs into a vehicle and fled the scene. In the meantime, Fletes Corneo was rushed to the hospital where he died from his injuries, while his loved ones mourned and the community reflected on his heroic actions. Law enforcement worked diligently to track down Raymond and rescue Downs. Described by some as a career criminal, Raymond has a lengthy history of run-ins with the law, which includes prior felony and misdemeanor arrests, including prior convictions for drugs, identity fraud, and violent crimes. 2 days after the shooting, Raymond was arrested during a traffic stop in Hemet. Downs was riding in his car with him and was battered and bruised, but alive, with non-life-threatening injuries, according to the authorities. Authorities charged Raymond with a laundry list of crimes including murder, kidnapping, criminal threats, residential burglary, and possession of a firearm by a felon. More than 3 years later, he remains held in custody amid the ongoing case. Number 18. Michael Bangston. 26-year-old Mikey Bangston III had just parked his car in Chicago's Logan Square neighborhood one morning in September 2021 when he noticed a man and a woman arguing. When he saw 22-year-old Jesus Garcia grab the woman by the neck and shoulders, Bangston asked her if she was okay, apparently outraged by the concerned onlooker's decision to intervene. Garcia pulled a 9mm handgun and shot Bangston, who was knocked to the ground by the force of the gunfire. As Bangston tried to crawl away from the scene, Garcia fired 6 more bullets. The victim was rushed to the hospital where he died from his injuries, and Garcia was arrested several days later for first-degree murder. During questioning, he reportedly claimed that he thought Bangston was going to harm him. Garcia claimed he couldn't remember everything that happened that night and told police that he had disassembled the murder weapon and thrown it in a lagoon. He also said he suffered from mental illness but was apparently unable to go into detail about the nature of his ailments. Prosecutor Kevin DeBoney challenged Garcia's narrative about feeling fearful based on surveillance footage, which appeared to show Bangston simply standing near the accused killer and his girlfriend. Bangston did not act threatening at any point throughout the video. The current status of the case is unclear. Number 17. Peter Enns. 48-year-old Peter Enns was driving along Interstate 94 in Waukesha County, Wisconsin, in July of 2017 when he spotted a minivan along the roadside with a flat tire. The Canadian visitor pulled over to help the couple who owned the van, right as a drunk driver got impatient with traffic and sped up on the shoulder in an attempt to pass some cars in front of him, later identified as 37-year-old Frank C. Schiller. The impatient and intoxicated driver struck Enns and the minivan, killing Enns and sending the vehicle into a nearby ditch with children inside. He was charged with 16 felonies, including homicide, operating while intoxicated, causing injury, bail jumping, and his 6th OWI. Schiller had a lengthy history of repeated drug and alcohol use, which goes back decades. At the time of the deadly wreck, he was out on bail for his 5th OWI charge. He also reportedly has a track record of disregarding the safety of others and had just gotten into an argument with his parents when he recklessly mowed down the victim. After his arrest, he claimed to have no recollection of leaving his parents' house or getting into an accident. In early 2019, Schiller pleaded no contest to 1 count of homicide by intoxicated use of a vehicle. Determined to show that his pattern of behavior would not be tolerated, the judge sentenced him to 25 years in prison, followed by 15 years of supervised release. While imposing the punishment, she told Schiller that she hopes he uses the time to get the help he needs. Number 16. Anthony TJ Antel. 22-year-old U.S. Army soldier Ricky Braden and his wife, Quenisha Johnson, had only been married for a matter of weeks when obvious fractures started to surface in their relationship. The couple argued frequently, and they got into a particularly vicious disagreement one day in May of 2016 when Johnson disapproved of a photo Braden had posted on social media. By conventional standards, there was nothing inappropriate about the picture, but by wanting to look pretty, Braden thought his wife was trying to attract other men. And while he felt bad enough to apologize for his explosive behavior, he remained paranoid and jealous. As he tried with little success to bottle these emotions, he became a ticking time bomb. Johnson thought everything was fine and that the fight had been squared away when Braden showed up unannounced at her job one day. He was supposed to be on base at Fort Hood that morning, so Johnson was surprised to see him pull into the parking lot of the Walgreens store where she worked. She went outside and they argued in the parking lot, where Johnson tried convincing her husband that she wasn't being unfaithful and that his attention was enough for her. But Braden was in no mood to listen to reason, and Johnson eventually gave up on trying to have a rational conversation. As she turned to re-enter the building and continue with her workday, Braden shot at her twice, missing her once and striking her in the leg. She ran inside and locked the doors. 35-year-old former Marine TJ Antel, who witnessed the incident from nearby, attempted to perform a citizen's arrest on Braden, who refused to comply with his orders and shot him in the head. Antel was pronounced dead at the scene and Braden surrendered to law enforcement a short while later. Just 6 weeks into Braden and Johnson's marriage, a man was dead, another man's life was ruined, and a woman narrowly avoided paying with her life simply for posting an attractive photo online. Thankfully, Braden will most likely never see freedom again. He was convicted of murder and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and was sentenced to life in prison. Number 15. Peta Levkovsky. While living in Bull Creek, Western Australia, in May of 2022, 42-year-old Peta Levkovsky and his wife Anna tried to help a boy in their community get his stolen bicycle back from a local teenager. Peta calmly and gently confronted the accused bike thief, saying, "Let's talk." But the teen had no apparent desire to engage in productive dialogue. Instead, he pulled a 7-inch filleting knife and stabbed Peta in the abdomen, causing him to collapse right then and there. Peta died from his injuries at the hospital, and his killer fled the immediate area, hiding the murder weapon and some of his clothing along the way. A few hours after the stabbing, the suspect was captured on video demonstrating how he carried out the crime. He then flipped both middle fingers at the camera, showing a blatant lack of remorse for his actions. Witnesses would later tell police that the suspect said he didn't feel bad about what had happened. By the time the stabber tried retrieving the knife and discarded clothing from their stash pots, the police had found the items. Scared that the walls were closing in on him, he asked his father for his passport so he could flee to Japan. His dad said no, and the killer was arrested the following day. According to prosecutors, the teen carried out the crime in a very deliberate fashion and showed little surprise when he learned that Peter had died. The defense, on the other hand, urged the jury to find the defendant guilty of a lesser manslaughter charge, arguing that the suspect meant to stab Peta in the leg. After deliberating for 7 hours, the jury concluded that the killing was intentional and found the teen guilty of murder. He was sentenced to 8.5 years in juvenile detention. Number 14. Nyani Finlayson. In December 2023, 27-year-old Nyani Finlayson called the police to report a domestic violence incident at her home in Lancaster, California. More specifically, she told the 911 operator that her ex-boyfriend wouldn't leave her alone and was refusing to leave her house. She could be heard screaming and telling someone to get off of her, and LA County Sheriff's deputies were dispatched to the residence. Upon arriving at the scene, law enforcement could hear Finlayson screaming from inside the apartment. Finlayson had a large knife in her hand when she answered the door, and she was in a clearly distressed state. She said that she was about to stab her ex and went back into the apartment while 3 deputies followed. In the meantime, the woman's very upset daughter told the deputies that the suspect had harmed her. Almost immediately upon entering the room, Deputy Ty Shelton shot Finlayson 4 times. She collapsed to the ground as her ex yelled out, "No, no, why did you shoot?" Body cam footage showed Shelton entering with a taser in one hand and his service weapon in the other. But none of the responding deputies tried to get the situation under control using the less lethal options available to them. Finlayson died from her injuries, and it was soon revealed that this wasn't the first time Shelton used lethal force on the job. during a domestic violence call at another home 3 years earlier. He had killed 61-year-old Michael Thomas. He had reportedly tried to stop responding officers from entering his home. Following Finlayson's death, Shelton was placed on administrative leave in accordance with the department's use of force policies. He was officially relieved of duty in early 2024 after his superiors determined that his decision to shoot Finlayson was not justified. Number 13. Johnny Hurley. 59-year-old Ronald Troik of Arvada, Colorado, hated law enforcement, and he wanted them to know it. While he had little criminal history to speak of, his family would later reveal that his anti-police sentiments had intensified noticeably over a decade-long period. It eventually reached the point where he spent all day obsessing over his hatred for cops online, and it was all he ever wanted to talk about. By then, Troik had stopped working and no longer had any close friends. In the meantime, his gun collection grew. One day in April of 2021, he descended into a mental health crisis, and his family felt they had no choice but to call the very people he despised the most. After failing to find Troik at home, police began searching for him around town. They headed to the local library where people were complaining about a man around Troik's age acting weird in the parking lot. At some point, he started firing rounds from his gun. 40-year-old John Hurley didn't think twice about putting himself in danger in order to keep others safe. Armed with his own pistol, he exited a nearby store and ran over toward the library where Troik was preparing to continue his campaign of destruction. After determining that Troik posed an imminent threat, Hurley fired 5 to 6 shots at him, killing him at the scene. At the very same time, the first responding member of law enforcement to receive a call about the situation arrived on scene. When Officer Craig Brownlow saw Hurley standing there with a pistol in his hand, he mistook the man for Troik and shot him in the back. Hurley looked a lot different from Troik and was wearing different clothing than the description police received of the shooter's outfit. But an internal investigation found that Brownlow acted according to the department's protocol. He resigned from his position in good standing and was not criminally charged. Hurley's family feels that the police department should bear some responsibility for the Good Samaritan's death. In 2021, the family reached a nearly $2.8 million settlement with the city, as well as a public memorial in his honor. Number 12. Lloyd Muldrow. In 2022, U.S. Marine veteran Lloyd Muldrow traveled from Virginia to Baltimore to spend the 4th of July with his friend, Marshall Cullins. When the 57-year-old entered the bar that they agreed to meet at, he saw that Cullins had been shot in the head and a man was pistol whipping him. Muldrow pinned the attacker to the ground and held him there until police arrived. As soon as the opportunity presented itself, Muldrow told responding officers that he had a concealed pistol in a hip holster. They removed the weapon and thanked Muldrow for stepping in to save his friend. But when a lieutenant learned that Muldrow had a concealed carry permit in Virginia but not in Maryland, he instructed his deputies to arrest him. Muldrow was charged with bringing a gun within 100 feet of a dwelling. He was released from jail after 18 hours and refused to take a plea deal. His attorney, Michael Stark, described Muldrow as a respected church-going civilian, veteran, self-defense instructor and youth mentor, not the type of person who deserves to be punished to the fullest extent of what the attorney described as an outdated law. If convicted, Muldrow could have lost his concealed carry permit for Virginia and faced up to a year in jail along with a fine of up to $1,000. He eventually became more open-minded to a plea agreement and pleaded guilty to second-degree assault in exchange for probation. Number 11. Julit Guares. While driving home in Worcester, Massachusetts, at around 2 a.m. one morning in November of 2021, Julit Guares noticed a vehicle that had crashed into the concrete base of a business sign. She pulled over to help and left her car key in its ignition. As she walked over to the disabled vehicle to find out what was going on, a man got out of the crashed vehicle, ran over to Reyes's car and got into the driver's seat. He proceeded to punch her several times before she placed him in a headlock amid her attempts to stop him from taking her car. She managed to pull her keys out of the ignition before her attacker could drive off, and the man fled on foot when he realized the police were coming. Shortly after the attempted carjacking, 40-year-old William Vassbinder was charged with assault and battery, carjacking, leaving the scene of property damage, using a motor vehicle without authority, and operating a vehicle without a license. While the outcome of the case is unclear, records show that he has a lengthy criminal history consisting of theft, drug use, criminal mischief, assault, threatening, strangulation, reckless driving, reckless endangerment, and more. Vassbinder currently has several pending cases in the state of Connecticut, including a felony larceny charge. Number 10. Roland Houston. When 36-year-old Roland Houston saw a group of teens brutally beating a man and shoving him onto the tracks at a Bronx subway station on New Year's Day in 2022, he risked his own life in an attempt to rescue the victim. An approaching train fatally struck the vigilant bystander right as he jumped down into the tracks. The assault victim was treated for a broken arm and other injuries, including lacerations and swelling to his face, while the attackers made off with his wallet and cash. 4 suspects were arrested in the months following the assault. They were charged with an array of crimes including murder, manslaughter, robbery, gang assault, and assault. One of the young men reportedly told police that they saw a gun sticking out of the assault victim's fanny pack, so they bear-hugged him and chased him down the platform. The victim managed to free himself, so the youths pinned him to the floor again, took his fanny pack, and threw it on the platform. That very same suspect conveniently claimed that he never saw the gun again. Authorities have not specified whether the victim was actually armed, but they did state that a witness saw one of the suspects flashing a knife shortly before the attack. The current status of the case is unclear. Number 9. Mark Sacket. When San Francisco business owner Mark Sacket noticed a man trying to kick in the door of a neighboring deli in December of 2021, he called 911. Then he and several neighbors followed the man because they wanted to be able to point him out to the police. The man quickly became violent and started swinging a 6-inch blade at the group, causing serious injuries to Sacket's wrist, which required surgery and left him with permanent nerve damage. In the 30 years he had been living and working in the area, the violence, vandalism, and drug activity were at their worst. In defiance of what many have come to describe as soft on crime policies, Sacket is extremely vocal on Twitter about the problems that seem to be plaguing San Francisco. One of those problems he believes is the failure to punish criminals, including Sacket's attacker, who was never brought to justice. Number 8. Rob Sedin. 63-year-old Rob Sedin wasted no time rushing outside to help when a teenage driver crashed their car near his home along Australia's central coast in August of 2022. Using his first aid training, he joined other neighbors who gathered around the wrecked vehicle to assist the victim. Seemingly out of nowhere, Sedin was attacked from behind by a group of men. He fell backwards and lost consciousness, and his 21-year-old son suffered a broken nose. Emergency responders flew Sedin to the hospital, where he was put in intensive care in a coma. He suffered a serious brain injury and underwent surgery to relieve the swelling, but the extent of the damage was unclear. 10 months after the attack, the family revealed that Sedin's healing progress had been slow-going. Sedin had suffered several illnesses and infections and was frequently in and out of the hospital between one ailment and the next. By that point, doctors predicted that he would not make any significant strides toward recovery. He would need lifelong care, resulting in enormous financial struggles for the family as they adjusted to their new reality. 3 male suspects in their 20s were charged in connection with the attack. The outcome of the case is unclear. Number 7. Rickerson. When retired Fire Chief Rick Rickerson witnessed a rollover car accident while driving along State Route 109 in Meansville, Georgia, in October of 2017, the 56-year-old's training immediately kicked into gear. Without thinking twice, he left his truck idling in the middle of the road and ran straight over to the accident scene. Working with other Good Samaritans, Rickerson helped pull Rebecca Buchanan from the wreck. She was unresponsive, so he began working immediately to revive her as he called 911. Buchanan's airway was blocked, and every time Rickerson cleared it, it filled back up with blood, so he kept clearing it as he fought to get her to breathe. He was still reviving Buchanan when Georgia State Patrol Trooper Sergeant Rodney Jeter approached and ordered him to move his truck. Rickerson refused to leave Buchanan's side. He would later recall how he had only gotten her to take a few breaths and was still attempting life-saving measures in the absence of any emergency medical responders. Jeter, on the other hand, would claim that Rickerson wasn't rendering aid when he was asked to move his vehicle. The situation briefly calmed down while Jeter focused on speaking with other witnesses at the scene, but the argument picked right back up when the two men spoke again. Rickerson emphasized how he would have continued rendering aid to Buchanan even if it meant going to jail, and how nothing else mattered besides saving the woman's life. Jeter arrested Rickerson for obstruction of a law enforcement officer, writing in a report that Rickerson was consistently uncooperative even after his truck had been moved and it was no longer in the roadway. Rickerson spent several hours in jail before being released on his own recognizance, and the charge was ultimately dropped. In a statement, the district attorney admitted that there wasn't enough evidence for a conviction and that the amount of publicity the case had received would undoubtedly interfere with the ability to select a fair and impartial jury. Buchanan survived, and she and Rickerson remain good friends to this day. Number 6. Wenceslao Gonzalez. Wenceslao Gonzalez never thought he'd get a chance to attend a Dallas Cowboys football game, so he was beyond thrilled when his wife Lindsay and his daughter surprised him with tickets for his birthday in September 2024. During the game, the couple saw a man berating a crying woman and they felt compelled to get involved. An already tense situation worsened tenfold when Salo stepped in, however, and the memorable experience the couple had hoped for quickly became a nightmare. A fight broke out between him and the man later identified as 32-year-old Rafael Antonio Ramirez, who punched him in the face. Lindsay tried separating the two and was knocked unconscious by a single punch from Ramirez, who was also accused of kicking the woman as she lay motionless on the floor. She suffered 12 eye, nose, and cheek fractures as well as a broken jaw. Her eyes were so swollen she could barely open them, and she had to undergo surgery to repair the damage to her face. Wenceslao suffered a fractured foot, and both he and Lindsay were unable to work while they recovered from their injuries. In addition to having their lives turned upside down, the Gonzalezes have decided that they won't be attending any football games in the future because they don't feel safe doing so. Ramirez was charged with 2 counts of assault causing bodily harm and is currently free on bond as he awaits his next court date. Number 5. Sean McKeough Jr. 23-year-old Sean McKeough Jr. was at a gas station in North Little Rock, Arkansas in March of 2019 when a pair of armed thieves entered the store and proceeded to rob it at gunpoint. Witnesses would later tell investigators that the robbers were threatening the clerk and customers, including 2 of McKeough's friends, which is likely what compelled him to try disarming one of the suspects. Surveillance footage reportedly showed McKeough lunging at Darius Bernard Stewart while another suspect, Draquan Lamont Robinson, turned around and shot him in the face, killing him at the scene. Police arrested 4 teenagers in connection with the crime, including Robinson, Stewart, Keith Kashawn Harris, and Keith Lamont Harris. During questioning, Robinson told investigators that he didn't mean to kill McKeough. In 2021, he pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and aggravated armed robbery and was sentenced to up to 60 years in prison. He'll be required to serve at least 70% of his term, which amounts to 42 years, and will be in his 60s when he sees his first opportunity to regain his freedom. Robinson's accomplices all pleaded guilty to their roles in the crime and received shorter prison sentences. McKeough's family sued the convenience store, Summerwood Partners LLC, arguing through their attorney that the entire situation could have been avoided if the clerk had complied with the gunman's demands and turned over the money from the cash register. Number 4. Richard Davies. 52-year-old Richard Davies was drinking at a pub in the English town of Yedden in May of 2015 when he attempted to intervene in an altercation between an aggressive customer named Jason White and 2 other men. White had been acting aggressive toward people for no reason when Liam Hancock and other pub goers restrained him and kicked him out. Even after being sent out the door, White continued to threaten customers with a glass bottle, prompting Hancock and his friend, 25-year-old Vincent Greaves, to chase after him in an attempt to disarm him. Hancock and Greaves knocked White onto the ground, at which point Davies decided to get involved. He was trying to de-escalate the situation, but his attempt at peaceful conversation was met by a swift blow to the face from Greaves, who struck him with such force that he fell to the ground and hit his head. Davies died from his injuries and Greaves was charged with manslaughter. In court, the defendant argued that he reacted instinctively to Davies confronting him and insisted that he had no intention to harm the victim. Greaves was convicted of manslaughter, landing him a 4.5-year prison sentence for his crime. He expressed remorse for his actions during his sentencing hearing, and the judge acknowledged that Greaves never meant to kill Davies, while also admonishing the defendant for his unnecessary rage. Number 3. Jason Spencer. Connecticut State Representative Miriam Khan had just attended a Muslim prayer service in Hartford in June of 2023 when she was brutally assaulted by 31-year-old Andre Desmond. Khan had initially tried to walk away from Desmond, who began following, groping, and trying to kiss Khan. He became furious when she tried to thwart his advances, and the violence only escalated from there. Desmond slapped Khan in the face and put her in a chokehold while mimicking gun shapes with his free hand. He then slammed Khan against the ground, causing a concussion and other injuries. When former U.S. Army Sergeant Jason Spencer immediately went to Khan's aid and fought off Desmond. He was later arrested for assault after police received video footage of him kicking Desmond in the head. Khan vocally defended Spencer, saying that he deserved to be rewarded for his quick thinking and heroic actions. Spencer also championed for his own innocence, and a petition was started in his support. In May of 2024, nearly a year after the incident, the judge overseeing Spencer's case offered to drop the assault charge if he successfully completed 1 day of accelerated rehabilitation. Desmond pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including attempted assault, and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Today's topic was requested by National Comment Reading as So 361. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Jonathan Adam Lecomte. While en route to the scene of an attempted carjacking in March of 2024, police in Lumberton, North Carolina received a call that the suspect had been involved in a hit and run and was trying to carjack another vehicle. As officers headed to their new destination, Good Samaritans at the scene sprang into action in an attempt to stop the suspect from getting away, but he managed to steal someone's car and, according to law enforcement, deliberately hit one of the civilians with it. The victim, 38-year-old Jonathan Adam Lecomte of Fayetteville, died from his injuries at the hospital. The carjacker, 28-year-old Ricky Alex Driggers, fled the crime scene in the stolen vehicle and eventually lost control of the car and crashed. He's facing charges of first-degree murder, larceny of a motor vehicle, fleeing to elude arrest, and 2 counts of common law robbery, and is being held at the Robeson County Detention Center amid the ongoing case. Stick around after number 1 in case you haven't seen our release about when captains go wrong. It's coming up right after this. Number 1. Valda Casas. 37-year-old Valda Casas and his wife were expecting a child any day when a vandal began targeting the family's home in Houston's Meadowbrook and Allendale neighborhood. In August 2024, the unwanted visitor came by 2 nights in a row. On the first night, the individual vandalized Casas's car. The following night, a neighbor alerted Casas to a suspicious car on the street. Worried that someone was going to vandalize his property again, he went outside to confront the suspect. As he approached the vehicle, its occupant shot him multiple times. Casas died in his 8 months pregnant wife's arms. Nearly 2 months later, U.S. Marshals captured the alleged shooter, a teenager named Christian Martinez, and booked him into custody on a first-degree murder charge. According to some sources, Martinez had briefly dated Casas' stepdaughter, who broke up with him for assaulting and restraining her. She also accused Martinez of calling her incessantly until she blocked his phone number. The young woman's mother Judith Molina denied that her daughter ever dated Martinez, telling news outlet KHOU that the defendant was mad because her daughter wouldn't give him the time of day to begin with. Molina was unaware that Martinez was stalking her daughter. In an alarming display of remorselessness, Martinez blew kisses at the people seated in the gallery during his first court hearing. He remains in custody with bail set at $2 million. Jody and Nick Suggs were arrested on August 21st of 2019, accused of being responsible for the death of 26-year-old Kelsey Starling in Winston County, Alabama. The couple, both 50 at the time, had crashed their watercraft into another boat while celebrating Independence Day on July the 4th of that same year. Starling, a schoolteacher, was a passenger in a wakeboard manned by 23-year-old William Jackson Fite. 4 people were injured in the crash, while Starling drowned before she could be rescued. Her body wasn't recovered from the lake until 3 months later, on October the 5th. Though Fite was not charged in connection to Starling's death, he was fined $2,000 for driving under the influence. The Suggs posted a $3,000 bond and were released a day after the accident occurred. In the summer of 2020, it was reported that Nick Suggs had reached a plea deal with prosecutors which ordered him to serve 6 months of probation in lieu of jail time. Number 9. Andrew John Santio. Florida boat captain Andrew John Santio was implicated in the deaths of tourists Nicholas Haywood and Azalea Silva during a parasailing accident on July the 17th of 2020. 37-year-old Haywood from Costa Rica and 29-year-old Silva from Texas had hired Sunset Water Sports Services during a vacation to Key West and boarded the boat, expecting to enjoy a parasailing expedition. As an experienced boat captain, Santio should have known the winds were too high that day to safely parasail, but he neglected to cancel the tour. Both vacationers quickly lost control as their inflated parasails dropped into the water. After the line connecting them to the boat was severed, the 2 victims continued to be dragged by the wind for over 7 minutes until the parasails finally deflated. Haywood died at the scene, while Silva was airlifted to a Miami hospital. Though she received treatment for severe brain injuries, she passed away from complications the following year. Florida forbids parasailing when the wind exceeds 15 miles per hour. The recorded peak on the day of the accident had been 35.5 miles per hour. Santio was arrested and charged with manslaughter as well as 3 misdemeanors. He was released after posting a $230,000 bond. Number 8. Michael Lawrence. English teen Emily Lewis died as a result of a sea crash in Southampton Water on August the 22nd of 2020. Lewis, accompanied by her mother, had boarded Michael Lawrence's inflatable boat along with several other passengers. 55-year-old Lawrence was said to have exhibited a complete lack of proper concern after the boat made contact with a 15-feet buoy, leaving multiple people injured. Lewis suffered a lethal lesion to the chest after the force of the impact thrust her into a metal handle. Instead of rendering aid to his passengers, Lawrence began pacing up and down the boat, speaking on the phone, even as Lewis's mother screamed for help. Though the victim was rushed to the hospital, her injuries proved too severe, and she was eventually taken off life support. While Lawrence faced manslaughter charges, 52-year-old Michael Hurley, owner of the company that organized the boat trips, was accused of failing to safely operate the watercraft. Number 7. Muhammad Ali Malik and Mahmud Bikit. Muhammad Ali Malik and Mahmud Bikit were arrested after the boat that filled with over 800 migrants capsized in the Mediterranean Sea, killing all but 28 passengers on April the 20th of 2015. 27-year-old Malik was identified by survivors as the boat's captain, while 25-year-old Bikit was described as one of the crew members of the 90-foot vessel, which had been packed with hundreds of people trying to emigrate to Italy, most of them natives of Mali, Gambia, Senegal, and Ethiopia. The few that survived the disaster were rescued by coast guards and taken to Sicily. Malik and Bikit were taken into custody on multiple manslaughter charges as well as counts of human trafficking. Survivors testified that the 2 accused had been more worried about trying to make themselves pass as fellow migrants than actually rescuing any of their passengers. Both were ultimately found guilty in court. While Malik was sentenced to 18 years in prison for the crime, Bikit was ordered to serve only 5 years. Number 6. Daniel Gavin Couch. 49-year-old boat captain Daniel Gavin Couch was charged with manslaughter after a parasailing accident in Marathon, Florida, left a woman dead and 2 children injured on September the 22nd of 2022. Supraja Alapathi, aged 33, had voiced concerns regarding the turbulent weather that day before boarding Couch's boat with her family. However, the captain assured them that it was safe to parasail despite the high winds. When Alapathi's turn came, a sudden summer storm made the situation unmanageable, and Couch thus cut the line connecting the parasail to the boat, leaving her stranded in the water. She was dragged by the waves for over 2 miles before eventually crashing against the side of a bridge. The victim's 10-year-old son and 9-year-old nephew were also harmed in the incident. Couch allegedly made no effort to save Alapathi, and the 2 young children were aided by the arrival of a nearby boat. Investigators in charge of the case concluded that Couch's actions had been gross and flagrant, and he therefore stood to face legal repercussions in the aftermath. Number 5. Julie Hardin. California Highway Patrol Captain Julie Hardin was found dead at her Tennessee home on December the 10th of 2022. The authorities came upon her lifeless body only 2 days after she'd been released from jail. She'd been accused of trespassing on the property she used to share with her estranged husband after entering the house with the intention of retrieving her dog. Although Julie had been the one to initiate divorce proceedings, she'd grown furious at her husband Michael for dating another woman 3 months after their separation. She was suspected of hiring a man by the name of Thomas Francis O'Donnell to kill her estranged spouse as a twisted form of revenge. The hired killer had a documented criminal history in Texas, where he'd previously faced charges for assaulting a former girlfriend. On September the 20th of 2022, Michael Hardin was last seen driving his black pickup truck. 6 days later, his body was found in an empty house in Burkesville, Kentucky. He'd been fatally shot prior to his remains being abandoned, and investigators ultimately linked both Julie and O'Donnell to the crime. 3 months later, the authorities received a phone call from a mail carrier who reported finding Julie dead at her and her slain husband's Salina residence. The official police report on the matter revealed that Captain Hardin had died under mysterious circumstances from a single gunshot wound. Number 4. Mark Stegel. On May the 28th of 2022, Mark Stegel drunkenly crashed his boat into another oncoming vessel in Savannah, Georgia, leading to the deaths of 5 passengers as well as injuries to several others. 46-year-old Stegel had been operating his boat near the Oatland Island Wildlife Center while under the influence of alcohol. The deceased were identified as 51-year-old Chris Leffler, his 50-year-old wife Lori, as well as their sons Zach and Nate, aged 23 and 17 respectively. Robert Chauncey, who was 37 at the time, also drowned in the crash's aftermath. 2 of the victims were declared dead as soon as first responders arrived. When police began a frantic search for the 3 missing people, they were found 14 feet under the water the following day. 4 other victims were rushed to the hospital and were treated for their non-fatal injuries. Stegel was arrested on 10 counts of first-degree murder, 2 for each of the deceased, as well as recklessly operating a vessel under the influence. Number 3. Carola Rackett. The 31-year-old captain of a humanitarian rescue ship was arrested after crashing the vessel into an Italian border police motorboat on June the 29th of 2019. Carola Rackett had been negotiating with Italian government officials seeking permission to dock her boat. However, she started to grow frustrated about having her requests constantly rejected, despite reportedly having people on board in desperate need of humanitarian help. The ship was carrying 40 migrants who'd withstood the elements for 17 days at sea, and their captain ultimately decided to defy Italy's Interior Minister Matteo Salvini, who supported anti-immigration measures. People gathered around the docks, some protesting against the migrants and others who were celebrating their arrival. Following the crash, Rackett was arrested at the scene. If found guilty, she faced the possibility of spending up to 10 years behind bars, as well as having to pay a $58,000 fine. The ship's passengers were transferred to various government centers in the aftermath in order for them to begin the process of requesting asylum. Sea-Watch, the organization of which Rackett was a member, praised the captain's actions, saying, "She did exactly the right thing. She upheld the law of the sea and brought people to safety." Pia Klemp, Another Sea-Watch member, likewise, ran into trouble in connection to Italy's growing anti-immigration sentiments. Between 2016 and 2018, Klemp commanded the rescue of over 140,000 migrants, but one of her ships was seized by Italian authorities in 2017. She was accused of cooperating with human traffickers and could potentially face up to 20 years in prison if convicted. Number 2. Jerry Nell Boylan. 68-year-old Jerry Nell Boylan, the captain of a California dive boat, was charged with misconduct of a ship officer for his actions during a ship fire that resulted in the death of 34 people on September the 2nd of 2019. Authorities call the incident the worst maritime disaster in California's recent history and fought to indict Boylan for gross negligence, misconduct, and inattention to his duties. The vessel caught fire near Santa Cruz Island, but the captain failed to ensure there was a proper night watch in place. Insufficient fire drills and crew training had been conducted prior to the accident, which played a significant role in the 33 passengers and one sailor getting trapped below deck, leading to their deaths. Instead of aiding in their rescue, Boylan was the first to abandon ship. Number 1. Jack Shepherd. On December the 8th of 2015, 24-year-old Charlotte Brown went on a first date with Jack Shepherd, who took her on a speedboat ride across the River Thames in London. Shepherd, aged 31, had allegedly been drinking wine and champagne throughout the evening prior to getting behind the wheel of the boat. He consequently lost control of the vessel at one point, leading to a forceful collision with a log, which sent Brown into the water. By the time she was rescued, the young woman was unresponsive, and she was ultimately pronounced dead. An autopsy revealed she died from cold water immersion. Shepherd, who worked as a web designer, had been traveling at twice the speed limit when the fatal accident occurred. He was arrested and charged with manslaughter before fleeing the country during the criminal proceedings in March of 2018. He was convicted in absentia 4 months later, but wouldn't face justice until January of 2019, when he finally turned himself into the police in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. After being extradited to the UK on April the 10th of 2019, he was found guilty of a second crime. Before fleeing the country, Shepherd had reportedly attacked a former soldier at a bar, smashing a bottle over his head. He was ordered to serve an aggregate total of 10 years behind bars for his various misdeeds. Thanks for watching. Would you rather risk your job to report unethical behavior or stay quiet but guaranteed to keep your position? Let us know in the comment section below.